And it actually transitioned into everything it was supposed to transition to. What a smooth transition that was. Happy Sunday, everybody. It is very good to see you. If you see, we have all these different weird graphics now that kind of look cooler than they did, I guess. Um, Anyways, I'm just really happy to be back again for another episode. This one's not about Parker's battery this time at all. This one's kind of, I wouldn't say it's new. It's sort of what the Unfiltered Historian really prides itself on as a broadcasting company, historian company, whatever you want to call us. We're just here to give you all history, same as you would give us if you were out on a battlefield. But we really like to talk more about the battlefields rather than just minutia detail after detail of movement after movement after movement. We like to do that as well too, but we also have those days where we just want to sit around a campfire and have a cigar and talk about a battlefield or something. Well, that's what we think we should run this place sometimes and have some of these little episodes. And I call them little, like it's not going to be an hour or so. We're running till 8:30, the latest. Trying to bring you guys what we've worked on. There's been talks about different programs coming up from the Unfiltered Historian, being whether on the battlefield itself, whether we're out there doing live videos just with one person or with multiple, and we have a desire to try to have all four of us on an episode. So the goal, and of course, if someone can't be there, it's okay. We understand. But next Saturday, we have a video that we're going to put up just like this in the same type of platform, but it's going to be more of a panel, and it's going to be very interactive. And the announcement will go up just as this broadcast is done tonight. The whole idea is to have you guys involved with this as well as much as possible, where there's even going to be an invite to join us in a chat on these panels. So when we put the event up and you join in on the show we do Saturday, which is going to be obviously on Antietam, so it's a follow up on this. You don't have to come in with an insane amount of book knowledge and running through it. If you've walked the battlefields and you know the story and you maybe have a memory you want to share with the panel and you just want to talk about it for a little bit and have your time to explain what that battlefield means to you, I thought this would be a really cool way to interact instead of just having people comment. So there will be a link invited so you can join us in a group here. It's a small studio thing that you do online, so like virtual studio, if you will. For those that are familiar with Restream, that's how it works there. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to download anything. All you do is click the link we send you, and it sends you to the place. And so long as you have a webcam and a good microphone, or just a microphone to where we can hear you, the invite is yours. And we would love to have your intake and your put on what a battlefield means to you and what specifically Antietam means to you. After that long-winded stuff, Darren, please introduce yourself so I can breathe. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm really good, mate. Yeah, you. So yeah, Daz here, and you know me by now, surely. So been on a few times. We haven't done any coffees and that for a little while because we've both been busy. But
And
we're here this evening to hopefully entertain everyone.
Yeah, I want to thank you too. Like, while I have the moment to do that, because again, life gets really busy, personal life included, and sometimes the dedication that I have. Unfortunately, this isn't the big bucks coming home winning a job, and that's not what this is for either. But this isn't what is warranting full time, and that. Given that I do have a few chances to do it full time, and there's moments where I'm able to actually put a lot into it. I wish it could be more consistent than that, and I think that's another thing that makes Unfiltered cool. We have no set schedule really, and when we schedule something, we do that just because it's either an event we really work on and we put a lot into. Not we put a lot of work in everything we do, but the whole goal is just kind of your untraditional approach to history. But he helps with that, and he helps by keeping us with something that I never even would remotely think about posting, and now I'm very interested in learning about. It's English history. And the days I can't get there, I can't post anything. He has been just absolutely incredible with keeping up with this page, and the on this day thing is something I wake up actually looking forward to. Like, one of the things I have in almost my daily routine now is seeing what Darren puts up for on this day. I'll throw a few up there that are just very monumental and well known on this days, but he finds those really good bits. And I have to check and see if he posts first before I post something, because I went to go post something the other day about Jack the Ripper anniversary. I look and I'm like, he got me. And he should have, because that's his area, that's his stuff. But again,
the thing is, I've got 5 hours of start on you. That's the thing.
Time warp thing that's going on here.
So I've got the jump on everything. No, I'm joking.
So
yeah, but no, if you want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah, and that's what, like I said, I appreciate you for just really taking the time out of your day to make sure that.
Again, I appreciate you guys. Get me on board, because yeah.
And I hope this is just as much a home for you as it is me.
Oh, it is. Yeah, definitely, 100%.
like I said, I may have the little face up there in the logo, like this was my baby, but these people are that face as well. They're that logo too. These guys have been.
Thing is, before you guys came along, I was plugging along, for 6 months, and you guys have, come along and asked me to join you. And I just, it blew me away.
I knew from
You know,
it was the video we did with
yeah.
I think it was Shelby
We
Flip.
did a Gettysburg one, didn't we? That's
That was
right.
right. And I felt really bad for not making the second and the way I left the chat because
Well,
I was
I know you
in the
couldn't
middle
get
of
a
the
signal
field.
though, could you?
It looked
Yeah.
like I was bitching about some stuff, and I was like, "No, guys, no," because I was trying to get in touch with you about what to do about sickles. Because I know you wanted to talk about them as well. So I was trying to reach out to collaborate, and of course, as I'm doing that, I'm in Gettysburg. Do you think I have the best service? They're calling me for the live stream. I'm like, crap. I wanted to do it on the field. I didn't have like unfiltered set up all the way yet, so I had no, the greatest chance to really do anything out there. It was my first video that I ever did with John Heckman, who tattooed historian previews. For those that know who he is, I'm sure many of you do. That was the first time I really was able to like test the waters and see how this video would go. The wind killed my audio, so no matter what, it wouldn't have been good. But I felt bad, and the next day I was like, "Look, I'm gonna make sure that I'm there for this talk. I really want to meet these guys because I was like, wow, I look crazy mean. And even they just bad reception." Long story short, I was speaking to Darren, and without even planning to, there was an instant collaboration while we were working, and we were feeding off of each other very well, similar to the experience I had with tattoos.
I think it was Burnside that brought us together.
Yeah, I mean, and
We had the same view on Burnside.
yeah,
We felt sorry for the poor bloke,
it did. And I was just like, look, I'm so glad there's somebody else in this world. Me
Yeah.
and John Roos, we share the same stance as well. So that's like the big thing about the Unfiltered. We're kind of Burnside apologists. Sorry, the creator. Okay, we can. I don't justify that.
No, we don't justify that one. Yeah.
I apologize when it comes to Fredericksburg. I look at
Yeah.
it in a different scenario when it comes to Fredericksburg. Knowing more about the battle on the Confederate flanks, the left, I think it's for the left of the Confederate line, the right, excuse me, far right. That line right there is really the deciding factor. Your Maurice Heights and Willis Hill and the Sunken Road and the Fairgrounds, all of that, which is the main assaults that you're seeing, that it's really a divergent area assault, and we try to drill that in. We'll get to that after Antietam because we're going to Maryland. That's where we're going for. We're actually going to South Mountain and Harpers Ferry. We're not
We'll
going
be
to
covering Fredericksburg when the time comes, I promise you.
and there will be street videos of
In
that.
detail.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because it's one battle I know a lot about myself.
Me too.
And if you don't know anything about it, Tyler, then nobody will. Because you live there.
I lived there, and the first time I ever got to do public history when I was with the Park Service giving tours every day, it was the Sunken Road. It was at least 3 tours a day, 35 minutes a piece of the the fighting there, just trying to wrap the entire campaign in one. And that was the place I started before I went to even Spotsylvania. And interns don't do Spotsylvania. That was a gift I'm truly glad was given to me, and an opportunity that they took on me was to offer something that wasn't traditionally offered. Of course, I've lived here 20 plus years now, so that was a viable thing. But like living on the Sunken Road in the cemetery house is an experience that there's nothing like it. So those are some of the best days of my life. And it wasn't. I look at it and I try to make sure I realize, it wasn't selfish reasons. And of course, I'm going to still always think it was, because I woke up and my window was 10 feet away from the wall. And that, mind you, is a reconstructed one, but I'm looking at it and I'm just like, it's still the fact that I can open my eyes and not even lift my whole body out of bed and just put the lines up and the sunken road beneath me. I'm just like, oh God, like you get these chills. You're on the heights. You're in the cemetery. So
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I like that.
It's one of those things that you just.
Do you know what? If Joe Biden doesn't pull his finger out and let me in October, then I'll be there in December, and we'll do a proper live from the battlefield on the day.
Awesome. And that's
I'm telling you.
We're going to take you street by street. I can't take you house by house anymore. People live there. And,
No.
Yeah, but I can
you won't get arrested.
Right. I can take you to the churches that we have pictures of, like cannonballs just racked through these things. And for a lot of my Fredericksburg friends here too, I'm hoping that you either join us on our walk. Let's get a group together to hear this. Like, come to a live tour. Who's to say this isn't a live tour either in person? If you live in the Fredericksburg area and you're free the day that we end up coming out and doing this.
Oh man, that would be so cool.
Get it in person. I'll talk to you in person the same as I will the phone or whoever's carrying the camera. And I mean, but it's cool to spread that history. And I think Fredericksburg is just this. That's not my baby. One of my biggest historical inspirations, Frank O'Reilly. He was at the Fredericksburg National Battlefield when I was there, the Spotsylvania National Military Park. Excuse me, it's not National Battlefield anymore. In fact, it was never that in my lifetime. It's 1970s and earlier. But
see, so we do have someone staying in a hotel in Gettysburg tonight. Where he?
Really?
Yeah.
Hotel in. I'm kind of jealous.
So am I actually. Yeah.
You are. Hardy, welcome to the stream, man. Happy Sunday. I hope you are doing well. And sorry, we're getting off on a random tangent in the beginning, but like I said, we have a long show tonight, so I'm not worried about going off on little tangents. But we are excited to bring you some good content. And again, this isn't a place to get the big tactical detail of what we're talking tonight. Tonight's going to be just kind of a conversation between Darren and I, and some of the notes that we've taken and some of the things we've picked up. We're going to share some of the research that we use, some of the books that really influenced the the ideas I guess we get when we go to these battlefields after we read, because a lot of the people read different things too when they go to battlefields, and a lot of people see the history a different way, and that's kind of what I want to highlight with Darren. Is you get different perspectives with that. And last night, I'm sure you guys, or if you haven't, please do check it out. It was a really cool conversation. Tim and I got on for a little bit, and we discussed Parker's battery and Civil War artillery just briefly. It was a short intro to all of that, but it was a fun topic, and we got deep into some aspects of artillery. And we got deep into that. There was, I think, just a really cool point maker from both sides. Like I came in with different points and different questions, and Tim did the same. So you're getting multiple perspectives of one battle. I think it's really cool because I use Gettysburg as that reference point. I've been there up teen times. Not a single time have I left there with a different view of something on that battlefield or learned something completely and wildly new. Same goes for all the battlefields I'm at here, whether I'm with somebody or not. Something is my takeaway from that is different every single time. And that's what these live things are cool, because when I'm talking to you and I'm reading comments from you guys, like I'm getting different points. So you don't even have to travel too far out of the battlefield. You can sit in the comfort of your own home, have that happen as well. It's pretty cool if you ask me. But that's what this is all about here tonight.
But
It's
we are in the middle of an important time, particularly in 1862. So do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I can go in and keep in mind in 1860, specifically in the Eastern Theater of War. So we're looking at a newly minted Robert E. Lee as commander of what now is the Army of Northern Virginia. I don't know if he's made the official switch. I do believe the official name has been changed at this point of the start of September of 62. Hardy says he's a big cavalry guy, so I look at Gettysburg from that point of view. And well, you know what, man? I hope one day you and I can walk out on East Cavalry Field and go out there on South Cavalry Field as well and talk about that, because I have the books and I have the want to go out there, but there's so many books in front of those that I've got to get through first. But if I'm with my friend and I get an interest spark, sometimes those books pop to the top of the list and get read very quickly. That's a good scenario. But we're looking again right after the Battle of Second Manassas. So I know I don't know if I can read anything. Not sad. We had some small talks, I believe, on Second Manassas, and in doing so, we really kind of opened the door for this talk to come about, because there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the weeks after Second Manassas, politically and militarily speaking. I'm going to start with Pope, the hero of the West, Pope, twice beaten by not only Jackson but now Lee. Jackson at Cedar Mountain. That was a tremendous defeat for Pope. Morale was probably the most affected out of his wounds. And I think going forward from that, Pope may have ridden a little more cautious. But then again, I lose that argument when we see that dreaded assault at Second Manassas, when they're in the railroad cut and they're repulsing in Longstreet, takes 25,000, 5 divisions. And, Porter takes the brunt of that. Again, something we talked about last night. So I like to looking at it, and I made a post on my personal page and then shared it to Unfiltered. So if you saw that, it was regarding Charles Wren, whose diary is very exceptional. If you have a chance to read that too, I highly recommend it. Hey, he writes just as a common man would write in the war. And he's a captain, so he's seeing different things as he's in the military, of course. And some things probably are more accessible to him than the private, which is good for research. But it's also fun to read the private's letters too. Don't discredit them, because those are the common people really have the strongest story in the war. The captains have some good ones too. And he just writes kind of how the scene looks in Washington City. So he's now in D.C. after Second Manassas, and he came off the coast with Burnside and the New Bern expedition and all that fun stuff in North Carolina. So he's already seen his fair share of hell in the U.S. war. And by the time he's in Washington, he's getting ill too. So, seeing all of these very horrific sights and demoralizing things that are just plaguing Washington in 62 in that summer, he's writing about that nonchalantly, but every bit of his writing has a touch of his exhaustion. And it's so you can't, like, these guys have been gone for 200 years almost, but you can feel the, like, just the emotion drifting from those pages with those words, with the way they're used and what he is describing. So there's some power to that as well, and that's, I think, to sum it up, what the whole mood of the country, even speaking for the United States, is kind of feeling. They're now tired of fighting day in and day out. This is now getting kind of constant. It's not going to be anywhere near what we're seeing in 1864 in the Overland Campaign, when you have combat every day. There's still a day or two break sometimes, but that 7 days in the Peninsula Campaign took a toll on both armies. Just because there's a victor doesn't mean they aren't any less tired. I mean, somebody had to work a little harder to win. Someone had to work hard to try, and the Union Army definitely made valiant efforts and had a good, I think, plan on paper. But there's so many things that had great plans on paper that didn't work out. And the Peninsula Campaign and 7 days, unfortunately, were one of those for McClellan, who was in Washington at the time of this demoralizing scenario for the armies. And as he's in Washington, he's getting, I'm sure you can guess it, prodded to do something. You can't sit like this. And we're not going to go into the Emancipation Proclamation and all that, because that's just a comment. And most people know that we're just talking more so about things that may not be known, or just that really the common soldier and the lower officers are dealing with. But I can mention in passing that because this is an important drive too to Fredericksburg coming up, so I might revisit that and dive into that more so in Fredericksburg. And that's another half of the reason I don't bring it up here, is because Fredericksburg really has me diving into the Emancipation Proclamation more so than Antietam, even though it's attributed for sure. But that's coming out. This is an idea Lincoln's having, and he needs the solidifying force to have that legitimate document be legitimate. And this is that solidifying force, is that victory that he needs, which is why there's so much pressure on McClellan. And we'll see Burnside prodded exactly the same way, and disaster does not get diverted this time. Not that Antietam wasn't a disaster enough, but that's the result, I think, of this campaign, and the shock that Lee just got to Maryland. That's what's happening in Washington. They're now getting wind. Confederates, first off, after Second Manassas, there's a morale boost again in this army. You've just won a great victory on the same battlefield where you whipped them earlier almost a year ago, a little over that. So that victory, obviously, that's a huge cloud of smoke for the Confederates. They're excited. They're feeling like they're on top of the world, and it doesn't take until January or July of 1863 for Lee to say that he thought his men were invincible. I think that's where it starts, is Second Manassas. It's not the 7 days. I think that, okay, I got out of here. Let's see how far I can go. Cedar Mountain kind of, it's rising a little more.
No, I agree with you. I think the Second Manassas definitely gives them that invincibility boost.
And it wavered for a little bit when we told why, and then boys, it skyrocketed.
Especially morale, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at morale.
And also, it makes Robert E. Lee believe that, we can get recognised by Great Britain or France, that,
exactly,
this would bring an end to the war, and, we could all go off happily.
I think the Confederate Army almost have a nicer diplomatic stance to the British and the other countries than the government themselves do, the politicians, because in the Confederacy, and it's very today kind of dumb to think about it, that they would want to use this as a power source, or like, a power move. As a guy, that's what I call this choking off of supplies that they're about to do. But the Confederates take their embargo stuff, all this stuff, they're going to make a lot of money off them, could be using to fund the war effort, which is cotton, tobacco, and other export products. And they're now charging exorbitant prices for these, and then virtually just not even letting them have access to it. And them being the English, the different countries that are engaging with the Confederacy still, being that it's not a legitimate country, it's probably few and far between. That's not something I know great full and well. Richmond burned most of their documents during the war, so we don't have a lot of that kind of information, I guess. And if someone does, and I'm just like blatantly missing it, please tell me, because that'd be really cool to study. But
the thing is, I know that the Confederate government held back a lot of the cotton to try and draw us in, Britain in, as you know. In the end, we had like they call it the, especially in Manchester and the industrial areas of northern England went through a really bad time with the lack of cotton, but in the end, Britain just sourced it from somewhere else. It wasn't as
You
good
have
as
to.
quality, but it did the job. But also, we turned to wool manufacturing. And the thing is, they always say, "Oh, would Britain side with the Confederate States?"
Well,
I
they
would say
sent advisors
no.
to find out.
I would say no because Great Britain at the time was getting a lot of wheat and a lot of corn from the federal states of America. So why would we start? Why would we cut our lines off from that?
No, and that makes a lot of sense.
So Britain would never have sided with the Confederacy, in my opinion.
And Todd on Facebook, I don't know why it's not letting me see your comment on Restream, but I do see it over here on Facebook. He says hello from South Carolina. Well, hello from Virginia. And where are you coming from? Good sir. Daz, where are you coming from?
Me,
Yep.
I'm coming from Folkestone in England.
Thank you. I actually didn't know which part of England you were from.
Yeah, so I'm from the
Yeah, I
southeast of
never
England.
asked you that. And I always hear seagulls when we talk on our like
Yeah,
message.
so I live very, very, very close to the sea. It's about a 10-minute walk from my house, Folkestone. And just down the road, about 5 miles, is Dover, the White Cliffs of Dover.
Hmm. That's a bucket list item right there, isn't it?
So,
In 1862, Lee's bucket list item was trying to capture Maryland and bring Confederates into his forces from their state, and also try to get recognition, like we said. So England is now kind of a target of Lee's, not as an enemy, but as a friend, and that's what I think the same stance he's taking in Maryland. And Maryland is it's a different animal here.
mhm.
Maryland is the site of a mob attacking a line of troops before I think this is
In
before
Baltimore, is that
right,
correct?
and throwing
Yeah.
rocks with malicious intent, and the troops firing on the citizens. There is the suspension of habeas corpus, and politicians virtually just taken out of their houses and arrested and jailed for the duration of the war because they were threats to possibly wedging DC between two Confederate states. That would have been tremendously bad for Lincoln. Lincoln wouldn't have had a good day. So with that line now separating between is Maryland going to be a Confederate state or is it going to stay a Union? It does stay a border state. It's kind of indifferent. It's not really messing with the game. It's not getting involved. It doesn't want to get up in the government's business, if you will. They're just not having it. It can't decide. I'm sure that Maryland State House was a warring place in Annapolis. Count me out of one of those meetings. I don't want to be in the gallery when someone throws a tobacco stained carpet across the room. Congress itself, and from experiences, going into those rooms and like being able to reflect and reading a lot of history on the violence in Congress, like politicians were no different to fighting and actually shooting each other and caning each other. So there was a war not only on a battlefield but inside of a courtroom and sometimes inside the halls of Congress, physically, and led to death. So these are happening too. This is how the war reaches every aspect of human life during the 1800s. Any war really does if it's that severe. Now, and we mentioned that Lee is looking at some opportunities that will really benefit the Confederacy, and things in mind to consider when we're talking about why Lee is making this decision to invade Maryland. When at this point the Confederates are really purely defensive because they feel as though they've been invaded. Uh, the sustenance and the Virginia landscape itself from seeing 2 years of combat. Now, these lines and these armies are not small, as we know they are huge. There's 100,000 troops at any given time. If Pinkerton was true in saying this, apparently there were 500,000 Confederates outside of Manassas at one point, which is ludicrous. We look at that and laugh at the numbers of the barely skeleton force that was really there when he was seeing them. There's a story of, and I have to find that and actually quote it, but there's a story of that guy that was taking a Union officer around the camp like 8 times and having the men move to with him so that he thinks he's passing multiple different troops, but there's really like a division. Because like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So there's ways that these numbers are getting messed up, but these are still large numbers. I mean, try to picture a football stadium in one solid farm field. It's a lot of logistical things to consider too when it comes to that, to how to maintain an army in a field. Corn is a very big draw for Lee, I think. Confederates are seeing food sources when they make that invasion, but they're going to damn the thing when they're about 2 weeks into it. Not even in their 2 weeks. The 17th is pretty much the climax of that battle. But green corn, food. The green corn not only symbolizes food. That's why I love the symbolism of green corn and Antietam and the cornfield. But there's a few things that this symbolizes when I like this. So this is an analogy I came up with one day and thought was really kind of cool to help understand that campaign. You can really look at it like that. The corn is the earth that is being destroyed by the armies here. It's a need for Lee to go to Maryland because he can't let Virginia sustain what it has been sustaining. It's food, it's sustenance for the army. But it's also going to represent one of the most deadly fields in United States history. And it's also insanely hard worked, plucked right before your eyes. David Miller's cornfield later on. His livelihood, a pension he would have to wait on. All of that ruined. And that era of corn, if you think about it, all of that just falls into Antietam was over corn. So we want to say Gettysburg's over shoes. I always throw that joke out there. No. Hell, Antietam was over corn.
Well, not just the corn, all of the farmers in that area, their
Yeah, right. That's
livelihoods
what I
would have
mean
been,
by that. That's what I. But you
yeah,
would
would
see
be
that that's the
completely
farm being
ruined. Yeah,
destroyed. Yeah. So you think of
I've
the
never thought
agriculture.
about it like that. Actually, yeah, you've brought a good point there.
Yeah, that and that
It's
was
made
that
me
was
think
another
about
thing
it
I had
differently
this
now.
year,
Yeah,
and I've been waiting for Antietam to come by to like teach that and really throw that
mm.
out there. And I haven't like
That's a
exactly
very good
practiced
point.
in my head, but I just laughed one day reading it because I kept seeing like how many soldiers were damning corn. I was like, well, if it wasn't for corn, you wouldn't be there. And I said that, and I don't know, my brain just went back and thought about it. I was like, you know what? That's one of the most truest things I think I've joked about it. Actually, that we wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that. That was a factor for Lee. So
That's
Britain,
another point you've triggered in my brain that I've not thought about before.
but it's one of those things. It's so funny and kind of wacky that you'll remember that though.
Hmm,
You know all the reasons right there in
definitely, yeah.
summary why Antietam was fought. I mean, that to me is just it's funny to be able to have the symbolism. It's cool to have that tangible thing to relate to and kind of chuckle at. It's funny, like Stonewall Jackson's arm being at Elwood. I always find that funny, whether it was actually dug up or not. I'm just like, I don't have an analogy or anything, but it's the ludicrous things like that. I'm just like, why? Who? Okay, we just know it was buried there. We don't need to know if it had a Christian burial or if Smedley Butler dug it up and took it on a date and did what. I know we don't care. We just know it was there at one point. It was dug. The act of taking Jackson's arm was that it was buried and even considered to have a Christian burial blows my mind. That's enough. You don't need to blow any further and tell me that it's here. There's a plot. Cool, dude. You got me sold. Don't mess the story. I mean, don't mess the integrity of that truth up. That's cool. And that's again why I like to see that coin because you're going to remember that going into studying Antietam now, and it makes different points either arise or you may have never considered before. You're like, wow, okay, this makes so much more sense because you're now looking at something different just because of that ear of corn. You're looking at reasons why that you may not like people. The Burnside, that's how we debunked that. Right, Burnside's an idiot for sending all those troops there. I'm saying all I had to say is 3 words. It's a diversion. Really, that's it. If you're a military historian, you understand at that point. But again, Fredericksburg's down the road. We'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll hear flack from that. I love that chat. But the Antietam is going to kind of really formulate all because of a few things too. Lost orders. Now, before those lost orders are even captured, the consensus in Washington, once Lee has decided that he was going to cross into Maryland and make this a actual campaign, so now we enter Maryland campaign 1862. He had permission from Davis sending him a telegraph on September 3rd, kind of flirting with the idea of taking the army to Maryland, and he was in a position in Drainesville, Virginia, to do that, and does get the go ahead from. And be cautious, but the go ahead from Davis. This is obviously kind of a very risky maneuver, both politically too, because you're now invading. You were defending. This is purely offensive on the east now, but it needs to happen. Again, the landscape is tattered and messed up, and the families around here are really suffering from this. The soldiers themselves are running out of places to find food and forage, and there needs to be recognition to give this country or this up and coming country. As in the mind, that's a lot. This was the talk of many capitals. This was an up and coming country at the time. They thought this might be the next big thing. So they need that recognition in order to support the military effort needed to make that country a realistic goal and end game for this army. However, all of that hampers on how Lee does pull this off because Washington is obviously out of the question on direct assaults. The forts around Washington are just They're not happening. I don't even need to go into detail how formidable they are. They're absolutely not happening. Lee knows that. But he has to find a way to strike at the heartland. So he's going to go in the farmlands, in the harvestable fields of southern Maryland. They happen to congregate very heavily around Frederick. Now, being that they're in Maryland, in the aspect of the invasion too, one of those being that they wanted to try and convert Marylanders over. If I am not mistaken, Frederick, Maryland was rather pro-union. So one of those seats in that part of Maryland, they went to expecting there to be very friendly receptions. There wasn't. And realizing that the farm fields they came after weren't as abundant as they thought they would be, and green corn being the only abundance, and that even not being ready to the point where it made many soldiers ill, mean that there needs to be now a new supply issue or resolution to the issue that they have, and that's Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is commanded by General Miles, and Miles himself requested to be removed from Harper's Ferry and isn't removed from Harper's Ferry. Now, this is going to start the just kind of our little focus points here, as we call them, just small little things that Darren and I have split together and wanted to have some say so. And Darren has decided Harper's Ferry is the route he wants to take tonight. I'm really excited to hear what Darren has found. As we both prepared for this before, going live for y'all, him and I spent a few minutes touching up everything and making our little notes. And we didn't actually talk about our notes together. That's one thing I just now realized. So it's going to be exciting to hear what we came up with. But at the end of the day, I did take a short list.
Yeah.
What we're going to be reading towards the South Mountain aspect in the Harvest Ferry. I do have D.H. Hill as our commander, but we're not going to read his OR. We're going to read Robert Rhodes Underhill. We want to read the lesser guy, the guy that's not as in command, not lesser as a man, just as in command. And then Alfred Colquitt and Jacob Cox. Those are the two we're going to read. That's the Fox's Gap, because I have some soldier accounts from Rufus Dawes and anything for Turner's Gap. And then him and I will fly, do something off the cuff for Crampton's Gap. We have plenty of material to do that with, and we still have about an hour and a half to go. So, Darren, if you want to get us
Okay, so I actually would like to start with obviously the Special Order 191.
I completely forgot about that. That is my fault. Oh my God.
And that's all right. The story behind that. So
absolutely,
the 27th Indiana, they stop and in a field, so just outside of the town of Frederick, Maryland, and a corporal by the name of Barton W. Mitchell actually finds an envelope, and inside the envelope, if you know the story, he finds the orders, and there is free cigars in there. Mm-hmm. Now, one of his friends runs off to go and get something to light the cigars, to smoke them, because they think it's Christmas. We found some cigars, but of course, then he realizes that it's actually an order, and it's order number 191.
It's the 12 days of Christmas for
September the 9th, 1862.
So McClellan has Lee's position literally in his hands. He's looking at Lee's position. So when Lee notices an aggressive McClellan, Lee knows something's up. I'm not trying to throw any type of shade at McClellan by any means, but I mean, kind of what I'm saying is McClellan wasn't necessarily always the most aggressive. And I mean, again, whatever your stance is on him, that's your stance, but he doesn't act like this. So Lee's noticing an out of character McClellan. Lee's not always also facing him. This was a new enemy for Lee that Lee just fought in Richmond for 7 days. Not even, I don't even think it's a full 7, because Joe Johnston was hit in the middle of one of the battles right around there, and he takes command from there. And when he takes command, he's now fresh against McClellan, but he knows what's happening. He's involved in the Confederate war effort enough in higher spots to be able to have an understanding of this enemy. And he's fought him a few times, so he knows a little bit about his pattern. He messed with Pope. He met a new enemy, crushed Pope. And, Pope was not McClellan. I mean, I actually, I'm looking at McClellan kind of as I'm not saying don't take Pope serious, but don't take Pope serious in the East. Seriously, that's not everybody saying. I'm not a big Pope fan. But McClellan, fan or not, he does have reasons, I think, why he wasn't rushing to attack the Confederates all the time, and that was just false information came flying in astronomical numbers to the Union High Command. The intel on Union forces in the very beginning of the war in the east of the campaigns, I guess the Eastern campaigns would have not have been worth a damn. George Sharp's really, I think, and that's one thing Hooker does help with later on. Hooker's very prominent in our story here too, but Darren does bring up 191 kind of being the big draw here because that's kind of the Antietam campaign's heartbeat.
I mean, it has to pass through a lot of hands before it actually gets into McClellan's hands. And again, like you said, because there's so many things coming in of, different things coming in they don't know whether to believe it or not at first.
Hmm.
It takes them a little while to think, actually, no, this looks real,
Yeah. So what's up with Harper's Ferry? And many of us have probably heard of Harper's Ferry from the
Well, so
raid, and
the,
maybe a little bit
the,
about it.
the,
Give us some. What
yeah,
is?
so I mean, if people are familiar with the geography of Harper's Ferry, they will know that the Shenandoah River and the Potomac River meet there for a start. I think I'm correct in that. Yeah. So anyway, now Lee dispatches Stonewall Jackson to Harper's Ferry. One reason being is it's Lee's supply line back to Virginia. So they need their supplies. That's an army's big. And they also need a way to retreat. If they get caught out. But Harper's Ferry is surrounded on three sides by steep heights, which is made impossible to defend.
Yeah, and they're very steep. I have climbed Maryland Heights.
And we are talking about you have Maryland Heights, you have Loudon Heights. I think I've said that right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the one. You have Schoolhouse Ridge.
Yep.
You have so there's Oliver Heights. So it's sort of down in like a little bowl in a way, I suppose.
Yes.
You could say. So, defending it is probably near on impossible. And also the defence of Harper's Ferry relies on holding Bolivar Heights. So if you're going to hold it, you need to get a hold of that. And of course, the other problem is Colonel Dixon Miles actually lacks experience in leading troops into battle. So he's not a great, he's not got a lot of experience.
No, and for clarity.
Also, Jackson sees, this area. I mean, he's familiar with this area. He's been around here before, hasn't he? It's not the first time. He knows what he's looking at. So he positions his artillery around Harper's Ferry in some really good positions. And by the morning of September the 15th, Jackson has nearly 50 guns on Maryland Heights, and also at the base of Loudon Heights. And they prepare to enfilade the rear of the Federal line on Bolivar Heights. Jackson begins a really fierce artillery barrage on all sides, and also orders an infantry assault at 8 a.m. Miles realizes that the situation is hopeless, and he actually knows that he's got no relief coming from McClellan, so basically he surrenders. And one of the captains of the 126th New York Infantry actually says to him, "What the sake, Colonel, don't surrender us, But what can they do? They're stuck. They're completely surrounded, They get completely surrounded and they're done in,
Yeah,
what can you do?
He requested earlier to be removed. He kind of realizes the problem going on and that there are going to be overwhelming Confederate numbers. And when they get that artillery into the naval battery positions up there on Maryland Heights, they could cause some serious damage down there in Harper's Ferry. Maryland Heights sits significantly high above Harper's Ferry itself across the Shenandoah River. And the Shenandoah and the Potomac meet there. So, it's a formidable river itself. So you need a bridge to get across that damn thing. But it's a threat, and it's very credible and very severe and very damaging to the Army if that is compromised. And that was the problem. And if it was compromised, there's not going to be a lot of survivors. Miles, I think, saw that, and maybe, that's more research for me to do more on that Harper's Ferry assault. But I think Miles tried to do the right thing by alerting way ahead of time, like, look, we might need to do something about Harper's Ferry. Halleck, I believe, is the one that was really kind of like, no, don't do anything. Halleck is a whole another
It's Halleck again, and he's
Not
always
like that.
sticking his,
I
always
think he
doing
looks like a
something.
frog, and I think he has a brain of a frog too. I will actually
He
only
does, yeah.
praise one historical figure, and that is Henry Halleck. I cannot stand him. Sheridan, I'm working on.
Again,
I don't.
Harper's Ferry is so important to both sides. During for the whole war. It
Mhm.
just is the where it is. It's so important.
Quick side note on Sheridan, by the way. Tim has asked me to change my stance or try to get an understanding of maybe change my stance by learning about him at Five Forks. So on my side reading this week, I'm reading about the Battle of Five Forks so I can make a final and accurate judgment on Sheridan. So I will have a report for that soon and let you know what I take away from
And
Sheridan.
also, the other thing that you get from Harper's Ferry, obviously, is eventually during the battle at Antietam, you'll get obviously Jackson goes ahead and marches his men back because I think he gets orders from Lee to go back. But of course, then you get the you know is it AP Hill saving the army in Northern Virginia in the end. Or is it no? It's early, isn't it? Sorry.
Early.
Yes, it.
What are
Sorry,
you
it
talking
is.
about the battle at Antietam?
I do get those two confused
It's Hill.
sometimes.
No, AP Hill's division, the light division, is what comes in at the end of Antietam and smacks Burnside across.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah,
I
he
shouldn't say
comes
smacks Burnside. I like Burnside, but I
and
mean
he literally force marches them back, and they're all
12 miles.
bloody
Yeah,
knackered. Yeah,
12 miles.
12 miles. Their tongues are hanging out their mouths.
Panting with
So
dogs, man. That's
I
a
mean, they
very
must have hated that guy by the end of that
sure.
march.
Sure, I would have too. I
I would
mean,
have been swearing. What's this doing?
Jackson ran his men like that too, and they loved him. That's like it's that admiration of your commander. Like Emory Upton got. I
Hmm.
mean, he didn't get his men killed like that at Salem Church, since the situation was very circumstantial. But I had an issue myself. So I was thinking like, wow, if my commander took me there, would I have issue with him, or would I be like these guys and stay very dedicated to him? The 121st New York shows me they're. Hey, we may have been fighting Confederates at literal musket range where we could reach the Confederate muzzle, but yeah, they still followed him. So there's an allure to being, what is it in the movie that was said, ain't or nothing between God and a commander or something like that, like a God and a general on the battlefield. Yeah, that's the closest thing to a God on earth is a general on a battlefield. That's the quote, and that's kind of a very true sentiment, I think, in many cases throughout the war. You're seeing that at Fredericksburg, and there's Lee to the rear, but I think that may have been something to see even in the Maryland campaign. Now, he mentioned that Harper's Ferry being such a strategic location for both armies, obviously it was going to see combat, and it has before. This isn't the first time it's ever been threatened. It's going to be threatened multiple times again too. But this is going to trigger another movement, and a lot of this again stems from September 13th, the lost orders being found. Those lost orders were game changing for the Union forces. For McClellan, I think he really knows he's got a steal on Lee. Now, we mentioned that we're going to read a lot from the ORs too, but I have a couple another batches of, I guess, primary sources that I think are interesting to share with you guys today. And one of those is Rufus Dawes. He's a pretty notable character, actually. Served with the 6th Wisconsin Volunteers, and if you guys have been to Gettysburg often and go over to the railroad cut, then you probably know darn well who I'm talking about. And his experiences throughout the war are documented in a collection of his letters. It's really more of a reads like a memoir, and it's very well written and very readable. So again, another book plug there. If you find his memoirs, letters, what have you, read those. Do yourself a favor. It definitely has a way to really bring the war to life when you can hear it from them. I mean, maybe through a different voice, but you're hearing what they experienced at least, and that says a lot. But Rufus Dawes definitely is one that I want to share from when we get into South Mountain, which we can get to at some point. But we're on September 13th. All right. And it's September 13th. I'm looking at a map here to try to get my bearings again. The gaps that we are going to focus on tonight are relatively unguarded right now on the 13th. We have Mumford and Hampton, Wade Hampton, of course. Their cavalry are really kind of picketing around Burkittsville, which is at the tail end of the mountain passes. It's really, I think, kind of at the end of South Mountain. So to the south of South Mountain, southwest, You have this little town of Burkittsville. Two cavalry commanders are separating what, at this point on the 13th, almost resembles the fishhook you see at Gettysburg. I wish I had a way to just throw this map up here. In fact, let me see if I can just pull it up and show you. This is from Badley Gottfried's maps of Antietam, by the way. But if you look where the fishhook is, which that's kind of what we're seeing right here, this whole thing. That's what is, I would consider, kind of an interesting thing to look at and consider why that is even a maneuver. They're splitting a line and facing a whole different direction. Why is that? Well, it's the gaps. There are gaps that are going to be accessible to an enemy trying to stop you from being an invader. If you are looking at this as a Confederate officer trying to plan a great defense, because you're on the offensive, but now you're going to have to start being defensive once you get your objective. You're only on the offensive until you get to your spot. That's something to look at and consider too. It's like you're going to have to defend yourself at some point, especially if the people you're invading do make a stand and cause you some grief. Given that Special Orders 191 were followed and they were also found, that means McClellan still had a virtual map of where Lee was. I don't think Lee didn't realize until after Antietam that they were even found. I think he was still kind of shocked at the speediness and aggressiveness of McClellan. On September 14th, the weather kind of dropped the night of the 13th, so now it's getting a little colder than it was. I think the 14th, it actually reaches to a high of about 70 degrees, so we're starting to feel that September air. And it was a relatively warm summer. They called it an Indian summer at the time. So, mind you, September was rather warm, and this is getting into now the first few cold days. So bones are a little rusty waking up in the morning if you had the chance to sleep at all. And at 6 a.m., one of those non-sleepers was Jacob Cox, and he is kind of sent to guard an area known as Fox's Gap, or at least probe and find out what the situation is. And the situation is going to be sort of in the hands of Illikum Scammond's brigade from the Kanawha Division, for those of you that know the Western Virginia battles and are familiar with West Virginia. His objective, was actually Turner's Gap, and that's just west of what they're going to be bivouacking in a place known as Middletown. Or Middletown. Cox, George Crook's brigade under Cox, is going to be sent to assist General Reno, who is also in the same task. Mind you, there are 3 gaps, so these generals are conferring on which gaps to guard. Who they're trying to just assess, in theory, what these gaps offer, who is guarding them, and what is on the other side. That's the situation I should be summing up for the beginning of the 14th, because they find their answer very quickly upon reaching these gaps. And Jeff Stewart's cavalry, I mentioned, was in a weird shape, and they're going to move a little bit, but Burkittsville's sort of still that focal point for them. Specifically, Mumford's cavalry. Wade Hampton's moving farther down towards the Potomac River to kind of cover Jackson, who is heading out in the direction of Harpers Ferry. As we discussed, that's kind of a focal point too, so that's going to be a well sought after objective, and there needs to be some type of reinforcements because that battle could go south very quickly, no pun intended. Meanwhile, we have Hood and his men and Jones's men all around Hagerstown. So they're far up north in Funkstown, Hagerstown, crossed Antietam Creek already, passed toward the west of Williamsport, or east of Williamsport. But you have a significant and sizable force moving on South Mountain. All those men under McLaws and under Anderson are very close to the Potomac, if not on the rail line. Rail line leading to Berlin, Maryland, past Pointer Rocks. These are areas that are not needing the men. Now, mind you, they're also moving, not really aware that McClellan's moving fast. But D.H. Hill is unfortunately the one on the other side of those mountains. And unfortunately, Pleasanton's going to be the first Union force to meet D.H. Hill, just outside of a gap in Boonesboro, Maryland. But in Fox's Gap, first gap that we're going to come to, there's a town known as Frosttown. Fox's Gap is sitting on the National Road. If you're familiar, National Road's a main thoroughfare in Maryland, and this is kind of a big area. Not population wise. When I mean big area to cross the mountain. It's a gap. It's an easily accessible route to get through the South Mountain, which is a very large mountain. So on the national road, obviously there's going to be some type of contention. Just east of the national road, a few miles, is Frosttown. And word's been coming into Union troops all day that the gap has been here and there with scattered Confederate forces, and some scouts may have been seen. But it comes out it's Colquitt and Garland, Samuel Garland to be in fact. Eliakim Scammon, who is with about 1,500 Federals, making up the 12th, 23rd, and 30th Ohio, and a battery of 6 10-pound Parrots, begin to move in the direction of Turner's Gap. And Pleasanton, again, being the first to hit, he's going to need some support. Scammon's going to be that support. Jacob Cox was, again, the commander of that and is going to start seeking more assistance, knowing that now contact has been made to start directing forces to Fox's Gap. Scammon's going to be the first of those. And he's not going to go directly down the national road where Colquitt is moving. He's going to move a little off to the right, to the left of a town called Bolivar, which sits in the middle of the national road. And actually, there's buildings on either side of the road. So it's literally bisected by this road. So he's going to move to the left of that and hopes to flank. And he's going to end up on the old Sharpsburg Road and end up going in the direction of the Wood Road, which brings him by the old Wise Cabin. So this is now bringing us to shape up the famous battlefield that's the site of a few monuments many of you may know. First of those is the 30th Ohio. I'm sorry, I'm flipping through notes as I'm going through this because, again, we're just going through this. So I have maps I'm looking at and notes trying to help narrate this as I go. But we know the 23rd North Carolina and the 5th North Carolina will move forward towards Scammon. Again, he moves off of the old Sharpsburg Road as Scammon's 30th Ohio starts heading to the flank of the 23rd North Carolina under Samuel Garland. Samuel Garland is a very interesting figure in this battle. Grief has racked him with the death of his family, first of all, when he's coming. So he mentions to have a death wish to begin with. His command was just ill-fated today on the 13th or 14th of September. He just didn't. So he didn't have it. It wasn't meant to be, really, in his case. He was outnumbered. He was the testing of the Union forces, trying to find out what their size of resistance was, and that's unfortunately where Garland gets put. Again, I mentioned the 30th a few times and the 23rd, and that's because the 30th moves up in a very bad position. So the 23rd is facing front. The Ridge Road, if you were familiar, there's a road behind them that's kind of in the shape of a horseshoe, the Ridge Road being to their rear, just about probably 30 paces or so. To their right is the 5th North Carolina, getting currently attacked by the 12th Ohio, who are shooting from two wooded sections on a place known as Loop Road, and there is a small little spur they will rest their rear on. The 23rd Ohio, meanwhile, is on the Ridge Road, moving to the flank of Bondurant's artillery in the 5th North Carolina. This is the opening of Fox's Gap on September 14th. The 30th Ohio is directly attacked by an unseen 20th North Carolina, who runs right up to the Ridge Road and enforces a volley into the 30th, who will divert their course and head for the flank of the 13th North Carolina on the far end of the Ridge Road. They're directly to the right of the Wise Cabin. And the fire drew by the 30th firefight, some of that went directly into the 12th North Carolina, who actually will remove themselves from the Ridge Road and follow pretty much a retreat back into the woods. They had no more business staying on that field. They took tremendous casualties. Well, now it's going to bring us to about 10 o'clock a.m. And 30th Ohio is still actively trying to flank somebody. They got hit by the 13th. The 13th falls back. It doesn't really compete too long, but there's a brief firefight between the 13th and 30th. 30th is victorious in that. Bondurant takes his whole four guns, swings them around, and starts aiming them at the 30th, as the 30th now makes their way towards the flank of the 20th again. This time, it's going to make a difference. And Garland is standing kind of in an exposed position. Remember, I told you he didn't have much of a happy life to begin with. I'm not saying this guy deserved death or it was a good thing for him. Just he was welcoming it if it came, and he was telling him like, if it happens, it happens. I'm not pushing it, but I don't have anything really to fight for. I mean, these are the essential points he's trying to make at that point. Is his attitude towards everything that will affect you as a commander, I think. But Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin will see Garland kind of exposed too far on the front, and he does calmly kind of say, "You're in danger. You need to get back." And Garland, even calmer, says, "I may as well be here as yourself." And that's all there was to it. All he sees is Garland spur back and hit the ground with violent force, put a blanket under him, try to seek medical assistance, but died before the blanket touched the ground the next time. Man that lost a family and the man that had nothing to live for really showed that and was taken out of the fight there at 30th Ohio, being the ones that would have fired the volley into that because they were able to securely get on the 20th flank, but then get halted by a revamped and reorganized 13th North Carolina. 20th stays in place. 36th Ohio is now being introduced in the same direct attack route, minus the flank, of course, but a head-on, using the Ridge Road as a parallel and using the old Sharpsburg Road as a parallel. If you're trying to get mental pictures here, they're going to attack the left side of the 23rd North Carolina while also facing fire from the whole entire front of what was just shocked the 20th North Carolina. Both regiments fall back. 30th now gets another push forward into the flank of the 13th. The 11th Ohio now introduces itself. The 12th Ohio hits the 23rd out of nowhere, right on their front, and the 23rd flanks them. So the 23rd North Carolina has now been hit 4 times, and this 36th Ohio regiment comes in as well to mean 3 regiments are attacking the 23rd North Carolina. 12th from the direct front, 23rd from the right, 36th Ohio on the left. All in one maneuver. Do you think they're going to hold on that road in any way, shape, or form? There's not a chance. It was certain destruction, and the only way they were going to avoid that was by hand-to-hand combat. Very nasty firefight breaks out. They think that's their only way out, and when men are cornered into a dark corner with a knife or a bayonet, fighting gets grim and fighting gets nasty. You wait till 1864. But this is, I think, where a lot of that necessity for bayonet does come in. And, you made the point, too, that many people will say it's not as common. I'm like, okay, but who's counting the bodies' wounds and showing, oh, this guy died of bayonets? It's not a really common thing to do that, is my rebuttal to that. So there are probably plenty of cases that we don't even know about because there's no one, unless it's been written about. But this is one of those that is written about quite a few times, and it does show in the situation there when you're getting attacked from that many sides, and it's almost an exact enfilade of everything. You can't move. You're almost getting attacked for your rear. You might as well be. They have to go to that route because they're certain to just be completely wiped out if they continue to fight and try to stand without using, their weapons to attack and break the lines a little bit. Certain destruction is not averted. They are routed. In fact, all the Confederates on the Ridge Road are routed. And the Union come through completely, and they are now in the direction of the Wise Cabin. Bondurant has spread 2 guns on either side of the cabin, on either side of the Ridge Road, and starts beginning to fire down the old Sharpsburg Road. The Ohioans are now closing in their position in their attack in that wedge that you see at Chancellorsville a year later. It's happening right in front of their eyes. And while this is going on, Wilcox is being sent to reinforce this maneuver, and Wilcox is coming on the old Sharpsburg Road at the time of this happening. So we're looking at about a noon to 2 p.m. lull when Wilcox shows up. Now, Garland's dead. Colquitt, I'm going to pull from in a minute from the official records. That's one of the greatest sources I think we have because we get to hear the generals' takes on these battles themselves. And, we mentioned D.H. Hill being one of the, leading characters here. But I think reading somebody a little bit down the chain of command would be a very interesting take. You know what I mean, Darren? And I think Darren echoed that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yeah.
So do you have any take on what we just talked about with Fox's Gap? Do you have any anything you want to add, or did you have any questions at all? Because I mean, like I said, we're learning as we go too, folks. So I think it's really cool. Is we are
No,
all
no, I think you've covered. I think you've covered the main aspects of it.
okay. I want to thank hugely the Iron Brigade book by Alan T.
Yeah, I
Gaff,
was going to mention the Iron Brigade, yeah, because
First for the Union by
they
Dan Letterman,
obviously
and
play a
Fred
pivotal role
Gaff.
in most of the battles in the Civil War, but or in that
Well, I have
area.
today from Rufus Dahl, a story to read from Rufus Dawes once we read our official record stuff, which I'm getting into now because I want to talk about what Colquitt saw and what we just read about. Pretty much Garland at least getting completely annihilated. Garland didn't live to tell us what happened. But detailing Garland's death, there's a lot of writing on his death in particular. But he did have a dash with his wife of 5 years was Elizabeth Meme Garland. So I do have some information on his death if that was of interest really quickly before I dive into that. And they only had one boy. His name was Samuel. He died of influenza within 3 months. His wife and his son. It wasn't like I said, he was not really destined for anything. And that morning in Box's Gap, he didn't. I don't think he woke up having the premonition that day or anything. It was just noted that he was necessarily not. He had a death wish. But they are confirmed rumors now that I'm looking at. There's not anything substantiating. He voices it, I guess. He was a great grandnephew of James Madison. He was very notable in Seven Pines, 7 days around Richmond, Second Bull Run. South Mountain, he's literally at the epicenter of the Wise Farm where he's shot. His regiment did get beaten back, so he would have had to deal with the hand-to-hand fighting that took place around the Wise Cabin. Scammond's Ohioans were trying to take him at sword point. He was in a firefight with the president, Rutherford B. Hayes. The musket fire had to have been, just and tremendous from the descriptions I'm getting here. But Garland did not fall easy. A bullet's going to pierce through his hip, and he's going to fall violently to the ground. He tried to turn and give an order, but the groan is all he could get out. And he was on the ground writhing in pain and died on the way to the hospital, which wasn't too far back behind the road. His last words were, "I am killed, just send for the colonel." It hit him in the center of the back as he was trying to survey his lines, tearing through his body and exiting above his right breast. Union's result of that was the death of Garland and 200 prisoners. So that regiment there, he was with the 20th that morning, helping them out along that line. The only real quote from the 30th North Carolina is from Reverend Alexander Betts. He was their chaplain. He just says, "Yeah, General Garland is brought to his tent dead." So there's not a lot of sediment to go on and go into crazy detail, but we do know that he could 62, so it's really early. It could have been either way. We don't want to dive into what ifs or anything, for that matter. But it could have. He had good standing so far in the campaigns. If he wouldn't have been snuffed out at South Mountain, he could have very well led some very interesting attacks at Antietam or defenses.
But it's like you said, he's gone out there in that frame of mind, and he's got nothing to fight for.
If he's going out there in that frame of mind, that may have been what made him so tenacious.
Yeah,
he wasn't.
I can see. Yeah, that would be why.
Let's read what Alfred Colquitt has to say about his Confederate troops on Fox's Gap. I think that would be a cool place to do that because we are boarding 8. I said we're going to finish this today at 8:30, so we have time to do the few readings we want to do. Go talk about some of the other gaps, and then build up to our next episode, which is going to be a really fun one. I believe, like I said, it's going to be very interactive, hands-on, and involved.
Yeah, I like the idea of having all that interaction. Definitely.
Me too.
Because it adds an extra dimension to what we're trying to achieve, and that is obviously giving, other people that voice, to talk about history.
1052 is the page I need to get to. So take another sip of beer and my virtual cigar. I like to call my vape my virtual cigar when I'm live. I wish I could. I don't like
Well,
smoking.
I've actually drunk all of my beer.
Did you really? Do you want to go get
I
another
did.
one before I read?
My glass is empty.
Give him a little quick beer run break. Go ahead and get one. I will wait for you.
Yeah, I think I might have to in a sec.
No, go ahead. I can wait to read. I got to the page.
Okay.
If you want to get a beer, go ahead. I got you. I have no problem.
Cool.
We still have like an hour, so you have your time. And I think after when he returns, when we read this from Colquitt, I'll go into the Union Scammon, Elicum Scammon's report, just so we have both of those. I think that would be cool. And if you guys are just tuning in on Facebook, if you're tuning in over there on Twitch, we really appreciate you joining. It's been a long time since I've been able to have like some consistent time doing a long video and just having discussions. And I want to really try to get these going as the podcast we did before. So like last night's was just kind of introductory, and we're gonna do some studying this week to get Antietam brought out. And I might even pop something up in the middle of the week about Five Forks, since I'll be reading that. I'm supposed to like Sheridan after this, so we shall see. I don't know if it's gonna shake me or not, but I have one book that was written by Ed Bars, and I think that's probably going to be the one that will end up, getting me to be shaking up a little bit. And Darren should be back. We'll let his camera back on in a minute.
There you go. Get all the live sounds on this program.
All right, I'm back to you. I just realized I was muted the whole
Go.
time I was saying that was
Yeah, I
some
was
cool
going to say,
sound. So I want to do an ambient,
there.
like,
Sorry.
yeah, I forgot I had to mute on here too. But what I was saying, I want to do a show from the coffee house. The tattooed historian gave me an idea. He wants to do his from a bar and have that like sound of the the laughter, the clinking glasses, and all that. I think the coffee house would be cool too to have like the espresso machine in the back, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
We had just a brief break for a second. He needed another drink, and I needed to make sure I'm prepared to read this long-winded note from Colonel.
Anyway,
Colquitt.
cheers, everyone.
Cheers, yeah, absolutely. I'm
Good,
drinking
good health.
beer in this time, but I did have a little IPA earlier today. This is more of a stout than my beer I normally drink. That's what I'm saying. I don't have any of my IPA stuff in front of me. I have a chocolate peanut butter milk stout. So I'm kind of off my rocker, if you will. Just out of the norm, but figured it would be one that would last an entire hour because
well, you're not going anywhere, so it don't matter, does it?
No, and I'm only going to be able to handle one. I'm not going to be able to have anything more than that. You kidding me? I don't know. I like to read on Sunday nights, so that's like my night to kind of wind down, not do anything crazy. But a beer that's going to take me an hour to drink is like, nah. It's heavy, man. Like if it tastes good, it's not like my favorite, but it's real heavy, And drinking those things, I'm good. Try to enjoy a beer.
Yeah, that's it. It's
I
safe.
don't want to swallow and be like, oh, I need another one. I used to. That's not fun because I can't bring you guys this awesome content, this great stuff. All right, I have Colquitt in front of me now. Again, Colquitt's one of the ones that was tasked with guarding Fox's Gap and ran into Elicum Scammon's Ohio troops. and was pretty much like beaten off the Ridge Road. And he writes a readable and not too exhausting report in here. That thank God it's only a page and a half, if not even a page and a half. So that's good. We're not going to be too long reading him, and then we'll move into what Scam and some of his Ohioans went through. But this is what Colquitt reports, and he's writing this on October 13th, so almost a month after this happens, in Bunker Hill. And that would be Virginia or Maryland. I think it's Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Sir, herewith I submit a report of the action of my brigade in the Battle of South Mountain, September 14th. On the night of September 12th, I left the camp of the division with the brigade and Captain Lane's battery, with instructions to occupy the commanding points of Boonville, Boonesboro. It would be known as Boonesboro. He had that, and it is corrected in here. 4 miles to the rear. The march and the unavoidable delay in selecting positions in the dark consumed most of the night. Early next morning, General Hill arrived. While engaged in making a reconnaissance, he received information from General Stuart, commanding the cavalry in rear, stood in need of support. I was ordered to move at once with my brigade and the battery of artillery. Proceeding along the turnpike 2.5 or 3 miles, I reached the summit of South Mountain and discovered the enemy's cavalry advancing in hours, gradually giving back. I reported my arrival to General Stuart and consulted with him as the best disposition of the forces. 2 pieces of artillery were ordered to the front, and a position commanding commanding the turnpike leading down the valley. The continued advance of the enemy rendered the execution of the order impracticable. They were thrown rapidly into position at the most available points, and the infantry disposed upon the right and left of the road. The enemy made no further efforts to advance, and at dark withdrew from my immediate front. To the right and left of the turnpike, a mile distant on either side, were practicable roads leading over the turnpike and connecting by a crossroad along a ridge with the turnpike. That would be our ridge road, by the way. Upon each of these roads, I threw out a strong infantry picket, the cavalry being withdrawn, and my main body was retired to the rear of the crossroad, leaving a line of skirmishers in front. And early next morning, my pickets were called in by being relieved by other forces which had arrived during the night, and my brigade advanced to the position it occupied the day previous. Upon the right of the road across the valley and upon the hillside, 3 regiments were placed, with instructions to connect with General Garland's line on the right. The force was insufficient to reach that distance, and there was a gap of 300 to 400 yards between the 2 brigades. The remaining regiments of my brigade, to wit, the 23rd Georgia and the 28th Georgia, were put in position in the left of the turnpike under cover of a stone fence and a channel worn by water down the mountainside. The first attack of the enemy was made upon the extreme right of my line, as with the view to pass in the opening between Garland's and my command. This was met and repulsed by a small body of skirmishers and a few companies of the 6th Georgia. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a large force had been concentrated in my front and was moving up the valley along each side of the turnpike. I informed General Hill of the movement and asked for support. Being pressed at other points, he had none to give me. The enemy advanced slowly but steadily, preceded by skirmishers. Upon the right of the road, 400 yards in advance of my line, there was a thick growth of woods with fields opening in front and around them. In these I had concealed 4 companies of skirmishers under the command of Captain Arnold. As the enemy advanced, these skirmishers poured open his flank a sudden and unexpected fire which caused the troops on his part of the line to give back in confusion. They were subsequently rallied and thrown to the right, strengthening the attack to be made upon my left. 2 regiments here were to meet at least 5, perhaps 10 times their numbers. Nobly did they do it. Confident in their superior numbers, the enemy forces advanced to a short distance of our lines when raising a shout, they came to a charge. As they came full into view, open and upon the rising ground, 40 paces distant, they were met by a terrific volley of musketry from the stone fence and hillside. This gave a sudden check to their advance. They rallied under cover of the uneven ground, and the fight opened in earnest. They made still another effort to advance, but were kept back by the steady fire of our men. The fight continued with fury until after dark. Not an inch of ground was yielded. The ammunition of many of the men was exhausted, but they stood with bayonets fixed. I am proud of the officers and the men of my command for their noble conduct on this day. Especial credit is due to Colonel Barclay of the 23rd Georgia and Major Tully Graybill, 28th Georgia, who with their regiments met and defeated the fiercest assaults of the enemy. My thanks are due to Lieutenant Jordan and Lieutenant G.G. Grattan of my staff. Their assistance is appreciated to this day. Very respectfully, your obedient servant, Alfred H. Colquitt. He writes rather well. I like his definition of what he saw there. So again, he's going to be in command on the far right of Garland. Garland's the one that's actually directly on the Ridge Road on the 14th. He's going to be kind of covering that right and trying to strengthen it, but doesn't have the required troops to do that. His numbers are way too short, and that gap is very exploitable. And obviously, Union troops see that too. It's visible to probably anybody. It's almost on the line of being common sense. And do you have anything you want to add, good sir?
I don't know. That was
All
great.
right.
That was great to listen to, though.
Thank you. And it's really nice to listen to what the soldiers themselves
Yeah,
say.
what
What
their
the
point of view
officers
was. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, I need to hydrate.
All I want to add is that it was a real morale booster for the Union Army just going into, into the Battle of Antietam.
Mhm.
I mean, Lee obviously gets his guys to retreat, but it is a morale booster for them just before that battle,
I agree.
which is much needed because they haven't got much. They didn't have much joy up to that point, did they? They didn't have anything to sing about. So
Not after the battles they've been enduring for the past.
no, not for the last year.
Mm-mm. Well, year. I mean, yeah, no, not year. Yeah, they've had a bad year, real bad year. All right, now I'm going all the way to the 400s now to find Squimmin's South Mountain report. I like this. Not everybody in the official records, specifically the Antietam and the South Mountain ones, realize those are two separate engagements. So some write these like 5 pages worth of battle information, and it's both battles incorporated into one. So it makes it kind of hard. Both
While
commanders.
you're trying to find that, I would like to point out that obviously about the preservation of the area. American Battlefield Trust have done and their partners have done a real great, and a job and acquired 647 acres of South Mountain Battlefield,
Yeah,
and that's amazing. So if anyone lives in that area, go and visit it, and go and walk the battlefield because that's the
yeah.
only way you're ever going to get
And
the
I echo
real,
that. It's a wonderful
you know,
battlefield. Like
that's the only way you're ever going to experience what actually, and see what the soldiers saw there, is by actually visiting the sites.
and while you're there, go visit Antietam too.
And
That's
exactly, yeah.
such a
So
beautiful.
follow the route, go up, follow the route the Union Army
Honestly,
went.
I know it sounds crazy, but if you guys are Gettysburgians and you go up all the time, one of those times just impulsively turn off in the direction of Antietam instead of
Hmm.
Gettysburg and spend your day there instead. And go
Yeah,
get dinner in Gettysburg, and maybe another time you always go see that darn battlefield. It needs the
because they're
love.
all important,
It's the bloodiest day in American history still.
Hmm.
And we come off a very
That's right.
tragic day. Yesterday, we celebrated we commemorated the 20th anniversary of 9/11 on a Saturday there, and it's reflecting on 20 years worth of that was a horrible, horrible day. And I'm not trying to compare the two, but we today don't understand. That's why when we compare and people, oh, they don't compete, they do because Antietam was horrible. Yes, it's war. It's a little different, circumstantial, but those are Americans altogether, regardless of who went to what side. That in theory, we were Americans fighting in a field there, and being that cornfield represents one of the bloodiest lots in American history. That day saw some sustained and systematic killing. September 17th through 20th of 1862 were just some of the most ill days you could even conceive. And then we go into a year later in 63. Those September days focus on bad things really for the armies. Chickamauga, the 20th of September in Chickamauga, Snodgrass Hill, the stand that the Rock of Chickamauga. We have what's his name, Thomas holding and having to stay from Rosecrance's retreat to Chattanooga. It's September and the Civil War don't get along, at least for the men that make up those armies that have to make this a war. And it's kind of sad to think about that how that month and it's directly a result of summer campaigning, of course. You're coming off the cuffs of all the summer campaigns, which tend to you see some of the largest of those campaigns in September because or in July, August, because it's the hot months. There's not a lot of there's no snow on the ground, so ice isn't the hamper anymore, and you have a chance for the best weather for that. So that I think there's a reason why September has that draw to being bloody. But then you have things like May in '64 where woods are burning and the horrors that weren't seen yet and were now we really focused and brought to the front of these troops. And it's every day. It's not. spread out with downtime after a battle for a month or two. It's constant. We were reading Kanawha before I got into more of the closing of Fox's Gap, moved over to the few other ones. So the Kanawha division is commanded by Scammon, or we were talking about him earlier. He was at the other side of the Gap, Fox's Gap, fighting against Colquitt. So this is what Scammon reports about his experience on the 14th. He writes this during the battle, coincidentally, he's in Harpers Ferry on the 20th of September. That's the Battle of Shepherdstown that he's writing this during. That was not a good day for Union troops either. That's another story that I'm doing a whole separate episode on Shepherdstown. I can't wait for that because that's my little kind of obsession when it comes to Antietam. I have an ancestor that was operated in one of the prisons there. He was shot through the leg, and we'll talk about him too. But he made it all the way to Shepherdstown and was convalescing there before he went to Richmond. Plus, the battle's pretty crazy to talk about too. Battle was very unique. If you're familiar with Battle of Balls Bluff, Shepherdstown is very replicative of that in the bluff aspect. But before that, Scammon had to fight at South Mountain and tell us what was going on. Let's read what he says. He said, "Sir, this is the earliest moment at which it has been practicable to make a report of the killed, wounded, and missing of the 1st Brigade of the division under my command in the battles which have occurred since we left the city of Washington." He sounds pissed. Let me start with that. That was a big FU. He's not happy. And I mean, that was he didn't. I have the honor to report. There's no honor to report. In the Battle of South Mountain, Maryland, the 1st Brigade, having left its bivouac at 6 a.m. of the 14th, reached the immediate vicinity of the scene of action at about 9 o'clock. I ordered the 23rd Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Hayes to move through the woods on the left of the road, crossing the mountain as to attack the enemy on the right and the rear of the right flank. Okay, he said right way too many times. I remind you, I'm reading their words, so if it sounds really jumbled and weird and off, these are not edited words. They didn't edit them in the book, and I want you to hear what they wrote. Keep it original. The regiment moved up promptly and effectively. Early in the encounter, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, commanding the regiment, who had gallantly and skillfully brought his men into action and charged the enemy in his front, was severely wounded and carried to the rear. He remained on the field a considerable time after receiving his wound and left it only when compelled to retire. On arriving at the foot of the slope at the front of the enemy, I sent back the 13th Regiment, commanded by Colonel Hugh Ewing, to attack that left of the position of the enemy, which was immediately opposed to us, with orders, if practicable, to seize a battery in that part of the enemy's lines. In executing this order, it was ascertained that the battery was beyond our reach and that its infantry support far outnumbered the force opposed to it. But the 13th Regiment attacked vigorously and drove the enemy from their immediate front. They were assailed by a shower of grape from the battery, whose real position and strength were not previously known, but they seized and held the crest of the mountain until they nobly bore their part in the charge by our whole line. In all of this, I am happy to say there was no faltering. It was the thorough work of good soldiers. The 12th Regiment, having in the center of the brigade, was moved directly to the front and briskly engaged the enemy. Its first advance deployed as skirmishers told upon the enemy with marked effect. It was more like a charge than the advance of skirmishers. They soon gained the east and drove the enemy back to the cover of the thicket behind it. Meanwhile, a section of artillery under Lieutenant Crome took position on the top of the slope and opened an effective fire upon the enemy. It was, of necessity, advanced so near the enemy's lines to expose the men to a most effective fire from his infantry. Lieutenant Crome was mortally wounded while serving a piece whose gunners had already fallen. The two pieces of artillery were, in fact, silenced by the killing of the men who served them. Captain McMullen, commander of the battery, had previously been sent to the right of the road by which we approached the enemy and kept up a most effective fire while the infantry advanced upon the enemy's lines. At about 5 o'clock p.m., a general charge of the whole line was ordered by the general commanding. When the 1st Brigade moved forward, the work was commissioned, and the enemy was driven at every point of our front. Total of 1st Brigade taken into action, 1,445. The killed of the enemy far outnumbered our own, besides which the 1st Brigade sent to the rear a number of prisoners fully equal to its total loss. E.P. Scammon, Colonel commanding the Kanawha Division. That's a Victor writing how he was obviously affected by this because he said he was really upset about it, the condition that he was having to fight. He writes another one 2 days later about Antietam Creek. Oh, he's committing reports of Colonel Hugh Ewing too. He's writing for somebody. Well, there's a account of what some generals were seeing at Fox's Gap on the 14th, and Fox's Gap obviously he tells you it's going to be until 5 p.m. that day that the fighting doesn't cease, and that's a long fight and
Mhm.
very uneven terrain. And the Confederates had a very small force. And it wasn't anything substantial to have to go up against, but they put up such a resistance that it took all day for them to be dislodged like that. And the Confederate reinforcements that were able to come in, the little bit that they had, helped to stem that fight and keep it at bay and make sure that they didn't get taken prisoner. But then you lose, one and almost an entire regiment gets completely destroyed in this process before this even breaks off. And it's cool to see that echoed twice to know that this wasn't as small of a fight. I mean, it's not grand scale, large battle where everybody's there. There's very few, but for the few that are there are some tremendous numbers that are virtually wiped out from the war. So not a good day for D.H. Hill and his troops at all. So, as we're getting closer here to a 10-minute mark out, I think one of the things we could do to kind of just sum it up, and as we did with Fox's Gap, we don't want to get into too much of the crazy detail. We like trying to really talk about the just what the soldiers themselves feel about these battles. Give you guys a nice idea of what's happening. Rufus Dawes is one that I think we should talk to, and then I'm going to let Darren actually close this out tonight. I always close out, so I want to have Darren do this for once and give him the right to close it out, and he feels I want a message. That's what I normally do is like close it out with.
Well, I do want to make a point because you brought it up.
Go ahead.
You said about one of the future presidents was
Rutherford
actually
B. Hayes.
fighting. Yeah. So the other one was William McKinley.
He was
There
at
was two future presidents fighting, and they both fought at Fox's Gap. So there you go. So Hayes was president in 1876 and McKinley in 1896.
1896. Okay. You see, I actually did not know when they were president.
So yeah, but yeah, that's pretty interesting, to think that two of these guys that fought in that battle end up becoming president of the United States of America. And I think it's pretty cool,
I know that McKinley was obviously at Antietam over on the side of the bridge because you had that monument there that talks about that. So that's cool to see. But I didn't know they actually fought at South Mountain. That's news to me too today. And there's two, not just Rutherford B. Hayes. Yeah. McKinley's also there. I should have considered Kanawha Division. I'm looking at Ohio, and that should have resonated with me. But I get so caught up on Garland's story.
I mean, also we can look at the so in total there were Union casualties. So there was 28,000 engaged, and there was 2,300 casualties on the Union side. We say only, but still 443 killed. I mean, it is compared to a major pitched battle. It's I suppose it is a battle, but it's more of a skirmish, I suppose, in a way, compared to what you see later on when you get to Antietam.
No, I would agree with that. I would echo that. Yeah,
the Confederates lose 2,600 and 325 killed. But they get a lot of wounded, and missing. This is the thing. You get so many people missing in the Civil War. That's the worst thing. Imagine that for the families. You never ever find out whatever happened to your loved one. That must have been the most horrendous thing ever.
Missing doesn't necessarily always mean prisoner.
No, it means they could have run away during the battle. They could have, just fallen down a hole.
Artillery does a damn number on the human body.
Because I have heard accounts that
we look at it as a not identifiable by combat wounds because
I've read some accounts that sometimes during the heat of battle, that is when some soldiers, and I'm not saying all of them, but some of them would take flight. Take the opportunity of the heat of battle to actually say, do you know what, I've had enough of this.
And that I see that happening. So Turner's Gap is not actually too far off from Fox's Gap, and I think that's to note because Wise's Field, Fox's Gap, and Turner's Gap. Let's see, from the scale here, 360 yards. It's about a mile, just maybe a little over a mile away. So these are relatively close in proximity too. So we focused on the action that was taking place earlier in the day. Remember, this whole fight in these two gaps are lasting until like 8:30 p.m. at this point. Turner's Gap is quoted mapping out until 8:30. That's a long fight. Well, it's
And
3:30.
also,
8:30 shifts over to the east.
I think McClellan will probably gets a little bit of flack after this as well, because there's a few days until Antietam, isn't it? Afterwards, and that maybe again, he doesn't move. Although he surprised Lee this on this occasion by being
Mhm.
fast, that they don't, go for the jugular,
No,
you know. And
yeah, it's
it's
really
that recurring theme, isn't it? Of
well, we've
never.
spread extremely thin, and that's what
That's what I
McClellan.
mean. He's
That's
got
why
no
McClellan feels
Jackson at
so
the
confident.
time. You
Right.
know, half his forces. Well, he's split in two.
Hmm.
Um, again, we're not there at the time, so we don't know what they're thinking or what they're.
We can't Monday Night General these people, or locker room general.
But for me, it's a little bit of another missed opportunity, maybe to, you know,
It's a missed opportunity. Well, I mean, I think it's you could say a lost opportunity. Not even trying to be funny there.
yeah,
I mean seriously, like you could look at there being a reason for that, and that's because the orders were lost. That gave up anything Lee
yeah.
had. If Lee didn't have that discovery, he could have done more. Or, again, it's a what if. I don't like to entertain, but it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
The
I know what
order
you mean.
losing was bad.
Hmm.
So the Iron Brigade enters at 5:15 and is going to use the what road are they? I think they're using the National Road themselves actually to get in. No, it's not the National Road. That's crap. It's not telling me what road it is that's going through the National Road. It is okay. So I was wrong. It is the National Road. That's what I thought initially. And he's going against Colquitt. That is going to be commanded by Gibbon. Obviously, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with General Gibbon. We'll see him in Fredericksburg, and we'll see him in many other battles too that he becomes very prominent in as the war continues. D.R. Jones, Kemper, Garnett, all of them are going to be present here at this battle too. So this is getting a little heated. Robert Rhodes is going to be at this battle. 26 Alabama is against an entire line of Magilton's 8th, 7th, and 4th Pennsylvanians. The 3rd Alabama is off on their own against Gallagher's 12th, 11th, and 10th Pennsylvanians. Doubleday and Phelps are moving into position to support the 35th New York, 23rd New York, 80th New York, 21st and 2nd sharpshooters, respectively, who are in a weird. All these assaults are weird because you have Garnett and Kemper forming a V, all Virginia regiments, one Alabama regiment under Rhodes over here in the middle of Kemper, and Colquitt's men are all in one solid line on the National Road, moving farther on to the west side of the road than the east, but the 6th Wisconsin is actually going to be at the left rear of a box column line. 7th Wisconsin moving to the front to replace the 35th New York and the 19th Indiana to go take on Colquitt's entire freaking brigade, it looks like, by himself. 2nd Wisconsin, 6th Wisconsin stays back and with Stewart's battery behind. All four regiments will move into position and go to support the attack against Colquitt, who is presently also moving forward toward the National Road. Again, most of his line does extend to the west, not the east of that road. And that fight will take place until the end. And then this is a very short one. This can close us out tonight. And then I will stop my piece and I want Darren to finish off on anything he has to say about this campaign and move us into next week. So these are words again from the experience of Elijah Hunt Rhodes. Wow. Rufus Dawes, who is the 6th Wisconsin protege, he is the face of that regiment. I swear it. And maybe rightfully so. He has such a voice for the 6th Wisconsin, and I think again his writing's incredible. Read this twice, and I'll do it again. I've had it since my last trip in Gettysburg this year, and again read it twice. It's pretty darn good as a material source. Turner's Gap, through which the National Turnpike passes over this mountain, was directly in our front. To attack this pass was the special duty for which we had been selected. To our left, along the wooded slopes, were a crash of musketry and a roll of cannon. That would be Colquitt's men off in the west of the road, just for orientation. And a white cloud of battle smoke rose above the trees. From Turner's Gap in our front, and along the right of the summit of the mountain, the artillery of the enemy was firing, and we could see the shells bursting over and among our advancing troops. For nearly an hour, we laid upon the grassy knoll, passive spectators of the scene. The sun was sinking behind the mountain, when our order came to move forward. The other two regiments in front, 7th Wisconsin and the 19th Indiana, moved in line of battle. Our regiment and the 2nd Wisconsin followed by at supporting distance, formed in double columns. Thus, we went down into the valley and began to climb the slope of the mountain, which was smooth at first and covered with orchards and cornfields. The regiment was halted in an orchard, and two companies, Company B with Captain Rollin and Company P, Converse, and Company K, Lieutenant John Tickner, were sent forward as skirmishers. Our skirmishers immediately encountered skirmishers of the enemy and drove them slowly up the mountain, fighting for every inch of the ground. Nothing could be finer than the conduct of these two companies or more gallant than the bearing of the young leaders. The officer commanding the skirmishers of the 2nd Wisconsin, Captain Wilson Colwell, was killed. For half a mile of advance, our skirmishers played a deadly game of bo peep, hiding behind logs, fences, rocks, and bushes. Two pieces of artillery of Company B or Battery B moved up on the turnpike under Lieutenant James Stewart, and when the skirmishers were checked, they would wheel into action and fire shell at the house, barn, or thickets where the rebels found a cover. The enemy now turned up the fire, and their batteries planted in the pass near the mountain top, but their shot flew over. General Gibbon, mounted upon his horse and riding upon the high ground where he could see the whole line, shouted orders in a voice loud and clear as a bell and distinctly heard throughout the brigade. It was always forward, forward. Just at dusk, we came to a rough stony field skirted on its upper edge by timber. Our skirmishers had encountered the enemy in force and were behind a fence. The 7th Wisconsin in front of us climbed the fence and moved steadily forward across the field as we followed them, our regiment being formed in double column. Suddenly, the 7th Wisconsin halted and opened fire, and we could see a rapid spitting of musketry flash from the woods above us and in front of us, and wounded men from the 7th began to hobble by us. The sharpest fire came from a stone wall. Running along a ravine toward the left of the 7th, Captain John B. Callis was in command of that regiment. He ordered a charge in front, throwing his right forward to face the wall, but there burst from the woods skirting the right of the field a flame of musketry which sent a shower of bullets into the backs of the men on the right wing of the 7th Wisconsin. Many men were shot by the enfilading fire, to which they could make no reply. Captain Holland Richardson came running toward us, shouting, "Come forward, Sixth!" Sharp and clear rang out the voice of Bragg. "Deploy column. By the right and left flanks, double quick march." The living machine responded to this impulsive force in instant action, and the column was deployed into line of battle. The right wing of our regiment came into open field, but the left wing was behind the 7th. "Major," ordered Bragg, "take command of the right wing and fire on the woods." I instantly ordered, "Attention! Right wing, ready, right oblique, aim, fire, load at will, load." The roll of this wing volley had hardly ceased to reverberate when Bragg said, "Have your men lie down on the ground. I am going over you." "Right wing, lie down. Look out. The left wing is going over you," was the command. Bragg had brought the left wing behind the right wing, and he ordered them forward over the men of the right wing as they laid upon the ground. The left wing fired a volley into the woods, and the right wing advanced in the same manner over them and fired a volley into the woods. Once more Bragg gave a volley by the left wing. There were 4 volleys by wing given. At the word of command and a long experience in musketry fighting, this was the single instance I saw other than a fire by file in battle. The characteristic of Colonel Bragg in battle was a remarkably quick conception and instant action. The conduct of the men was worthy of their commander. In the deployment of the column under fire, they hurried over the rough and stony field with the utmost zeal while many men were struck by the bullets of the enemy. There was neither hesitation nor confusion. After the 4 volleys by wing and a welcome cheer by the 7th Wisconsin, there was positive enthusiasm. Our whole line was slowly advanced up the mountain, the men shouting and firing, the rebels behind the stone wall and in the timber would shout, "Oh, you damn Yankees, we gave you hell again at Bull Run." Our men would shout back, "Never mind, Johnny, it's no McDowell after you now. Little Mac and Johnny Gibbon are here now." The rebels fell back from the woods, but stuck to the stone wall. The hostile lines had approached each other closely, and the fire was deadly. It was dark, and our only aim was by the flashes of the enemy's guns. Many of our men were falling, and we could not long endure it. Colonel Bragg took the left wing, directing me to keep up the fire with the right wing, and crept into the woods on our right, advancing a considerable distance up the mountain. He gained higher ground than that of the enemy in our front. In front of his position, opened fire. Colonel Bragg directed me to join him with the right wing. Owing to the thick brush and the thick darkness of the night, it was difficult matter to scramble up the stony side of the mountain. To add to our difficulties, the rebels opened fire upon us, but our gallant left wing fired hotly in return, and the junction was completed. Our cartridges were getting short, and our guns were dirty with bad powder. Gradually, by direction of Colonel Bragg, we ceased firing and lay still on the ground. A man in Company A exclaimed, "Captain Noyes, I am out of cartridges." It is likely that the enemy in the woods above us heard him, for they immediately opened a heavy fire. We returned the fire, and for a short time the contest was extremely sharp. This was the last of the battle. When all was again still, Colonel Bragg felt sure that he could hear the enemy withdrawing. He ordered 3 cheers for the Badger State. They were given and brought no reply. A few volunteer skirmishers crept forward into the wood in front of us. Further pursuit was impossible. We were nearly out of ammunition, and our guns so dirty that we could hardly use them. We lay among thick bushes on the steep, rough slope of a mountain in almost total darkness. We did not dare to let the men sleep. Colonel Bragg sent to General Gibbon for ammunition. General Gibbon replied that it was impossible for him to furnish it. But he had hoped we would soon be relieved by other troops. He said that we must hold the position we had gained so long as there was an inch of our bayonet left. The night was chilly and the woods intensely dark. Our wounded were scattered over a great distance up and down the mountain and were suffering untold agonies. Owing to the difficulties of the ground and the night, no stretcher bearers had come up on the field, and several dying men were pleading piteously for water, in which there was not a drop in the regiment, nor was there any liquor. Captain Kellogg and I searched in vain for a swallow for one noble fellow who was dying in great agony from a wound in his bowels. He recognized us and appreciated our efforts, but was unable to speak. The dread reality of war was before us, and the frightful death upon the cold, hard stones, the mortal suffering, the fruitless struggle to send a parting message to the far-off home, and the final release by death, all enacted in the darkness, were felt even more deeply than if the scene had been relived by the light of a day. After a long interval of this horror, our stretcher bearers came, and the poor suffering heroes were carried back to the houses and the barns. At last, word came that General Sumner's troops were marching up the mountain to relieve us. How glad we were to hear it! They only can know who have experienced the feeling of prostration produced by such scenes and surroundings after the excitement of a bloody battle. It was after midnight, and it seemed to us bitterly cold. The other regiments of our brigade had marched down the mountain, but our relief, where was it? We sent Adjutant Brooks to General Gibbon, who said that our relief had been ordered and would certainly come, but it never came. Colonel Bragg finally sent Adjutant Brooks to Brigadier General Willis A. Gorman, the brigade commander, who had orders to relieve us. The adjutant reported that he offered to lead the way, to prevent the possibility of a confusion or mistake. But the General Gorman's reply was, "I can't send men into the woods tonight. All men are cowards in the dark." He forgot that the men, whom he condemned to shivering and misery for the rest of the night, had fought and just won a bloody battle in the dark. We were not relieved until 8 o'clock in the morning of September 15th, when the 2nd New York Regiment of Gorman's brigade came up. As soon as it became daylight, we examined the field of the battle and found many dead and wounded rebels. The troops opposed to us were 5 regiments of a brigade commanded by Colonel Alfred H. O. Colquitt, the 6th, 23rd, 26th, and 28th Georgia, and 13th Alabama Regiment. One rebel soldier from Georgia, wounded in the battle, shot in the head, his face a gore of blood, fled from us as we approached. We could hardly persuade him that it was not our purpose to kill him. General George B. McClellan was stationed in the same field where Simon's battery was planted. Simmons' battery, excuse me, not Simon. And he had watched over the brigade in engagement. He wrote the following to the governor of Wisconsin: "I beg to add that my great admiration of the conduct of the 3 Wisconsin regiments in General Gibbon's brigade have been seen under fire, acting in a manner that reflects the greatest possible credit and honor upon themselves. And in their state, they are equal to the best troops in any army in the world." After being relieved by the 2nd New York, we marched down the mountain to the National Turnpike, and the men began to build fires to make coffee and cook their breakfast. But we were ordered to march immediately to the mountain house on the top of South Mountain. It was hard, but the men fell in promptly and marched along, munching dry hardtack. It was now 24 hours since they had had their coffee. And that's where we'll stop with Rufus Dawes' account of Maryland, because he starts talking about Antietam, and that's spoiler. But pretty much he just gave us again another account, and I didn't have to narrate that battle for you. That's why I love these soldiers' accounts, because we can talk about a battle, and he gives you the close and personal, and the, I mean, he inadvertently, sure he does that, but the inadvertent ending to the Turner's Gap campaigns, which is pretty much the battle was a very bad instance for the rebels, and the Union held the ground and were able to wait for reinforcements to withdraw.
Very powerful. Very
What
powerful.
and that's why I like Rufus Dawes as kind of our go-to closer of he.
The thing that got me out of most of that is one thing I've always hated about being a reenactor is cleaning the rifle afterwards, and
He
you
said they couldn't use them.
pointing out they can't use them because they're so freaking dirty.
That's a whole nother logistical problem.
I mean, that's just craziness, you know. They're so brave. You know, we'll never comprehend what them men went through. You know, you'll never ever understand.
And that was going to be the fight. I think the closing fight, because Crampton's Gap was earlier in the day, and that ended. That ended at like 7 p.m. And the result of that was because the defenses the Confederates were holding on the Arnoldstown Road, they just completely abandoned those.
And then could you imagine you've just fought that really hard battle, and then you're told you're just about to brew your coffee, which, as we know, is the Union Army's staple. You know, as I tell everybody, reenactment coffee for the Union soldier was like, you know, their lifeline. And then you're told to march up the hill again.
Yeah, it's like I said, that
That's hard,
battle.
isn't it? You know,
South Mountain is not a small battle either. If you've ever been, if there's a war correspondent monument, it's one of my favorite monuments ever that was dedicated to people that. If you're not familiar with what a war correspondent is, it's a journalist that specializes in warfare and covers a lot of military action or military stuff. I was gonna say stuff that's so general, but it's a cool monument. Not using that as just kind of like there's so many things to see. The first Washington monument's up there actually too, and that's a really cool site. But not only that, but so is Fox's Gap. Two really notable generals that fall: General Reno, a Union officer, and then General Garland, one that lost his family. He falls. There's a monument to Reno up there. It's pretty darn cool. And there's also a North Carolina monument up there because those North Carolinians took a lot of casualties. It was a very sad day for North Carolina, same as it would be in Gettysburg on July 1st with Iverson's brigade. But South Mountain is, I think, something I'm going to revisit myself. And this podcast is the reason I started revisiting it. But even after completing it, I have more of a interest to understand it as I prepare for Antietam this week. And there's some more attacks, and Crampton's got to take place still. And I realized that the 96 Pennsylvania, who I actually study very seriously, I don't know why I didn't even think about this, is at Crampton's Gap. They're later with Upton and Spotsylvania, and that's why I look at the 96 so much. But I might, on the 14th, I might talk about the 90s. I might write a little article on our blog page, so check that out. And I may pop in here and just talk about them. But if I do anything on South Mountain on the anniversary, it'll be with the 96, since we discussed some of the other ones today. Give the 96 a spotlight. So expect it in either an article or a video. But my part is done, and I'm going to have our good friend Darren close us off tonight.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, I haven't really got much to add to what Tyler just said there. I just want to say thanks for following the page and engaging in everything that you do, and keep following us. And we've got lots of stuff planned in the future, and we're just going to hopefully keep growing. You know.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to see again where this goes. We've been doing this strong since July, and since July, you guys have just been incredible with your engagements and in the comments that you're giving back to some of our posts that we're putting up, and you're watching the This Day in History stuff we put up, and you're coming and you're engaging in these. So having you all part of this is what's really the make or break, what makes it so worth it, because it's very interesting to be able. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks.
We really appreciate it. And I know you're in Gettysburg tomorrow. And my email that you sent me last time, for some reason, nobody can email me there. So get in touch with me on Twitch. I see you're on Twitch. Send me a personal message on Twitch, and I'll get you hooked up with the information. We can correspond. 'Cause I want to see some Gettysburg pictures. And I may, if you have the time, ask you to take a few pictures of a spot for me, and we'll use them in one of my articles here, and I'll give you all the credits for it. Because I have an idea to write something, and I need some pictures, and I'm not able to make it to Gettysburg right now due to some financial things. It's a tough world out there, and I'm also a newly apartment owning guy, so money only exists in making sure I have a place to stay at the moment. But that'll change. Hardy, I appreciate you so much. You're tremendous.
And guys, remember what Tyler said next week when we do our Antietam. It will be one day late, but that's because of people's schedules.
Right, and we're doing it on a Saturday, so that
But we're going to do it on a Saturday, and we want as
on this.
many people to come and join in as possible
Correct, and
because we want to hear other people. We want to talk to other people.
We do, and I'm as soon as, like I said, this is over tonight. Once I have some time to read and relax, and have another soda or two, I'm going to go ahead and put up the advertising, the event, so that you can go to it. And like I said, you can let us know now. You can let us know that day if you just want to talk about maybe how much you love walking the sunken road, and that, or you're a jogger and you go jog that battlefield all the time, or if you climbed up to the top of the tower and you have an experience, or if you whatever. It doesn't have to be a huge tactical, just whatever that's why I want it so open, because I want you to tell me a good memory you have with Antietam. Let's really commemorate not only the troops that fought and gave their lives there, but the people that continuously go to this park to keep their story alive, because those give experiences themselves, and that gives you experiences that last lifetimes. Honestly, you'll remember trips to these battlefields, whether you liked it or you didn't. You remember it. It's a formulative experience, no matter the age, because battlefields for some reason stick with us when we go to those things. We're not going to remember every little detail, but you'll remember the sights, the sounds, what was happening weather-wise. The soldiers remembered that too, but they had the added fear of death and destruction, and also honor and courage, and some very interesting emotions all in one place. That's just it's tough to comprehend still to this day, and I wish maybe one day I could. Think that's why we study history, because we'll never fully comprehend the severity of a war like that, and hope never have to. Darren, you said you have nothing left to offer our friends tonight?
No, I've a great chat again, and
all right,
yeah.
Guys, this is a great opportunity to be able to talk to you, and I'm glad that you stuck around to listen to us blabber off. And if you're watching later on, again, this was a Confederate invasion of Maryland episode focusing on South Mountain and Harpers Ferry, on a battle that we haven't crazily studied on either. This is just notes that we've taken in a couple books we may have been able to reference, and all of those have been tremendous tools. The first source material, reading Rufus Dawes, you guys have all the places to look for this too. There's options if you want to learn more. I'm going to leave today on a note of recommendations for books, actually. And the first of those...
Yeah, I definitely want a recommendation for that one, because I'm interested in that one now.
The first one is one that I haven't even read yet and haven't even used. And I'm going to recommend it just because the author has a writing style that I am incredibly fond of. And I've heard accolades about this, and I've referenced it. I can't say I haven't read through it. I flipped through and referenced. J. Michael Priest is a fantastic author. Again, it's traditional, not really going to be that traditional approach. It's a view of the battle from the soldier's perspective. You're not getting enough of, like, I'll use an example. We're taking a blimp and looking at a huge map and all the battle lines, and we're learning about the maneuvers. You'll do that from a soldier's eyes. You'll see what it's like to be on a horseback and ride through a creek in Potomac. So you may not know exactly where you are on the map, but if he's telling you this is some investigative journalism or simply historian work here for you to practice, if you're so interested in finding out where they were, he gives you the regiment. Go get a map and start doing it. I'm not just saying that to be a smart ass either. I'm like, that gives you the experience of what historians do. We don't know where they're at off the top of our head, or maybe not at all. We go and find other places that can help us lead to those clues to show us where they were at. And fact check it. Use two maps. All that's cool, because that's all available in J. Michael Priest's books, because he gives you that opportunity. Maybe not knowing so, he never writes in his forewords that that's his goal, but that's something you can do with any author, honestly. Be your own historian. Read this stuff and then check it. If you have the other resources, there's websites to look. Antietam maps are all over Battlefield Trust as well as South Mountain. So I encourage you that, because sometimes maybe you'll find something no one else has been able to find that changes the way we look at history or understand the story. And with that, I leave that challenge in your hands. Thank you guys so much for joining with us. This has been another fun and hopefully an informative night for you. If you're not on our Facebook, give us a follow. There's the link right there. This has been another, great fun podcast. It's another Unfiltered Historian podcast. That's not what it is. It's a fun night chat with you guys. Darren,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for being here, and we will. Actually, too, I wanted to put that up real quick just so you guys saw my recommendation. It was Before Antietam by J. Michael Priest. I don't know why I had to put that up. The second one.
Thank you for spending my money again for me.
You're welcome for spending money. The second one, real quick, before we go, I'm going to give another review. I just completely forgot I was giving you guys book recommendations. Rufus Dawes, his actual letters, his biography. I don't know what you would call that, but that in itself, fantastic stuff. We obviously read it. He's very powerful, and his prose is amazing. His approach is at trying to understand the meticulations of a military machine, as he calls it, blows my mind. And I love the analogy that he uses, how he is really saying that this is a well-oiled machine, and if it's worked correctly, if it's treated correctly, then it's going to function and execute correctly. And we see that in many battles that he is in, because he's in the Iron Brigade. The goddamn Black Hats, they don't get that subsequent because they're just, lazy, not skilled fighters. That came from that attack against Colquitt. And I do believe that's exactly where it came from, because of that attack that they put up on South Mountain. If you want some more soldier stuff, and some cool preservation stuff mixed together, I highly recommend the three of these. Ezra Carmen's trilogy on, well, it's not even a trilogy. He wrote just a huge 1,200-page manuscript on the history of Antietam using the same technique that Bacalder's going to use. But Carmen actually serves in the 13th New Jersey and is there at Antietam. So he's reaching out to veterans and getting the ones that survived, of course, and getting their story of Antietam and putting this in here. And he's responsible for the plaques that, if you've ever been to Antietam, you've seen there's so many plaques out there. Those are all his creation. He helped really bring the tour into place, some of the signages, and we could go on with that list there. But that all comes from this, and I think reading into his life, and or the brief life that you can get from the forward, is kind of a really cool touch to this book particular, because I like, being former park intern, I'm preservation galore. Much of us are in the history field, so reading a preservationist historical account and a veteran at the same time, it's very unique and it's awesome. It's actually extremely readable. Thank you, Thomas G. Clemens, for making this understandable in today's day and age. That must have been a hell of a task to have to write that. And I'm so glad to have these three. This was like, I got my copies when I guess they went out of print for a little bit. I'm not sure what was going on with it, why they were so expensive. But the only copies of Maryland campaign that were the volume 2 on Antietam were like running around for $160, and let alone the books are already 40, but it's worth every freaking penny. It's going to a great publisher too. So Savage PD puts out phenomenal stuff, and this is one of the trilogies they put out that's, I think, up there with the Bacalder papers, if not above, because he was actually there. Not taking away from Bacalder, but hearing it from an eyewitness tells a hell of a different tale. Not always an honest one though. Don't always get tricked just because they were there. Chamberlain's the greatest example of that.
Hmm.
We said before Antietam. Obviously, I'm going to say the War on Rebellion official records. That's a given. You should already have known that those are needed. But another great one that Savage Speedy, well, it wasn't Savage Speedy, it was actually Ted Savage before that, when he had his old company. But the Antietam essays. There's a Fox's Gap essay by Scott Hartwig, and Wilbur Jones does one on Special Orders 191. The two essays that begin this book. So that, to me, if you want a little more in depth and some, again, different perspectives that may go against tradition, there you go. It's known as Antietam, the Maryland Campaign of 1862, Essays on Union and Confederate Leadership. Any other books? Yes, Garland's death account, the small bits of information that we do have. A compilation of deaths from the Civil War and going through the battle. So it's a narrative of the entire war, but instead of giving big battle narrations, it gives you the dead of the main commanders that are killed at different battles throughout the war. Garland came from here. Appreciate him. And that Derek Smith is the author of that book too. I haven't seen that around a lot recently. I'm glad I picked that up when I did a few years ago. New this year, First for the Union. That's written by Darren Whipperman, and this is a corps history of the First Corps from Antietam to Gettysburg. I haven't read this yet. I only used one map out of here today, so I don't want to recommend it, but I just want to say I've used it as a source. I'm not saying that for any bad reason. Let me read it first before I recommend a corps history. I've never read an entire corps history before. So that'd be cool. This I have read along with Rufus Dawes many times because this is a classic. On Many a Bloody Battlefield, 4 Years in the Iron Brigade by Alan Gaff. Read it yourself. I have every recommendation in the world today. It's just fantastic. It's the Iron Brigade. And Alan Gaff writes fantastic and does great research, and it's noted heavily and noted well. So, On Many a Bloody Battlefield, pair that with Rufus Dawes' autobiography or his letters, whatever you want to call it. Final book is one that is the absolute most essential from this talk and tomorrow or Saturdays. The Maps of Antietam by Bradley Godfrey. Even if it's the paperback, get the paperback first. I want to put this away on my shelf and never open it again because it's a nice hardback, and grab that darn paperback black and white they have, because I take this on the battlefield with me every time I go out there, and it's just starting to lose its life. I wish all of them came out in paperbacks. That'd be helpful. But yeah, you guys have a reading list now. If you need it, it'll be on
Yeah.
the
And
page.
if you want to borrow any of Tyler's books, he lives. No, I'm joking.
We'll borrow when we have the Dewey Decimal
It's not a
System.
library.
I do have library stamps now, mind you. It's in
Yeah.
Austria. They
So
used to
you
take
can
those.
get a little library card, the Unfiltered Historian Library
Can you wait
in
till I get cooked
Fredericksburg.
up in here first? Let me show you something. Do you see that pile down there?
Oh my God.
That's called no bookshelves. That is a madhouse that is making my heart break every 5 minutes. And you know what? I've been sleeping on my couch literally for 2 days because breaks my heart to look at that. I had to move from the couch because I had a stack of books out there in the living room that was about that tall, and I'm like,
I did notice
hide
that
it.
your pictures, it looked a bit tidier in your living room.
I wanted to finally sleep and not look at heartbreaking mess, and now I'm like, I want my bed tonight because that couch hurts my back. So I just gotta until I can get those suckers over here, man. I'm facing the nasty fire hazard book pile.
Yes.
I love those things. They're not nasty. It's just they don't belong on the floor. They're books. They need their
I
little
think you've
spot.
actually got more books than a library. I must say.
And that's just my Civil War. The only things you guys just saw is just Civil War, with more on the other side of my bed. I have all of my Revolutionary, my World War One, my Vietnam, and World War II stuff still at my old house.
And soon to be a bigger collection because I'm going to recommend some more.
I know I'm bringing on more. The first thing I have is I actually got a friend of mine is the history or the art of warfare in the 15th century.
Bloody.
Yeah, it's what I hear, but I haven't been able to get through it because the guy wrote it in like 18 something, and he's writing in almost old English. I'm like, oh my god, what the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. What's that?
He's like, ye old warehouse shrinking. I'm like, bro, just say the. Okay, I'm just kidding. I respect it for what it is. I love it. But it is. Most people wouldn't be able to read that. It's tough for me,
Yeah.
wise. I'm like, do we have a new King James version of the book? Like, can we have?
Yeah.
But guys, again, the joking aside, that's what we do here on the Unfiltered Historian. We say we're gonna leave, and we're still here 2 hours and 7 minutes.
Yeah.
This is
Still
the
here another 5 hours later.
give me and Darren a few minutes after we go live just to recap and revisit what happened today and make some edits and if it needs be. So again, please comments, questions, recommendations, they're welcome. Now, if I can find this, there we go. That's the one I wanted to find right there. You guys have yourself a wonderful week. It is a Monday morning tomorrow. They're so exciting and fun.
It's a Monday morning now.
It's
It's
a Monday
2
morning.
o'clock in the morning in the UK.
Oh wow, it's 8:55 over here. Darren,
See
yeah,
you soon.
see you at stream, Darren.